Becca, I'm really glad that you chose to speak about the Tower of Babel this morning, a choice she made on her own, by the way, I promise. It's such an interesting story that has permeated our culture in so many different ways. I guarantee those of you who are here this morning, the next time any of you hear an ad for the language learning app Babbel, a new light bulb will go off in your head as you realize where they got the name from. But Becca, since you talked about the Tower of Babel, I'm going to go back and talk about Noah just a little bit because, well, that story is also probably worth a few minutes of our time. The very first verse of this morning's Torah portion, Genesis chapter 6, verse 9, introduces us to Noah with these words, V'Noach ish tzadik haya b'dorotav. Noah was a righteous person in his generation. We read that verse and we're left scratching our heads a little bit. Noah was a good guy for his generation? What the heck does that mean? There's two different ways to understand this qualified statement. Noah's generation, as we've established, was a really, really bad one. See God's desire to wipe them off the face of the earth with an epic flood. So, was he considered good only in comparison to those really bad people? And had he lived in another time, he would just be meh? Or are we to understand that despite the fact that he was surrounded by evil people, he still managed to be righteous, and therefore, in another generation, he would have shone even brighter? I'll reframe this using one more example. If I were to say Alexander Hamilton was a great Treasury Secretary for the late 1700s, is that a compliment or an insult? That second question we can leave to Becca and her friends to debate later, hopefully through musical style numbers. But the question about Noah is one that has been hotly contested by rabbis for thousands of years. We can understand why. It's a difficult ethical question about how we see our place in the world and in society. The two different sides are summed up well by the commentary given in our red Humashim. One opinion holds that the power of society shapes the behavior of the individual. The other maintains that the individual holds the power to withstand the pressures of society. It's not a tension that is easily resolved. And if you were expecting any sort of definitive answer to that question, I apologize in advance. We can, however, glean some insight into Noah's behavior by comparing him with another great man in the Torah whose name was mentioned this morning, Abraham, or as he's called before God changes his name, Abram. We are introduced to Abram at the end of this portion, reading about his family lineage, and we'll get to know him a lot better over the coming weeks. Abram faces his own series of tests at God's hands, including a scenario where God proposes utter destruction. God tells Abram that God is going to destroy the wicked cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, level those evil cities and all the people in them until there is nothing left. Abram does something incredible in response to this revelation from God. Abram bargains with God. He tells God that if 50, 45, 40, 30, 20, even just 10 righteous people can be found within the city of Sodom, God must not destroy the city. Abraham does everything he can to talk God out of this act of destruction. He strives to save as many people as possible. Spoiler alert, it winds up being a moot point. No righteous people are found in the city, and the city is subsequently destroyed. But putting that aside, it's a remarkable power move by Abraham, and it stands in stark contrast to the actions and inaction of Noah. Noah built the ark to save his family and the animals, but we don't see an effort to save anyone else. Noah may have been a great man, and living in another time, he may have been either better or worse, who knows? But at the end of the day, it's hard to stack up against Abraham. Becca, it's hard for all of us to be like Abraham. Life as a teenager can especially cause us to embrace our Noah-like instincts. Save yourself, make sure you get out alive. And it seems like you've certainly developed the joy and resilience that bring you personal strength, whether that's coming from your tight-knit family, your great friends, or your love of acting and drama. But I think you realize that it's not enough to only look out for yourself. I find myself incredibly inspired by your Mitzvah project. You're embracing the role of Abraham, looking out for others, making sure that LGBTQ+ youth are out of harm's way, safe, and cared for. That willingness to stand up for what's right, the instinct to protect the vulnerable, that will serve you and the world incredibly well. Becca, you've spent a lot of time in this shul over the last couple of years, not just in Hebrew school, but I know that you're here helping your mom out, maybe under conditions of being voluntold with different projects around the synagogue. My hope for you as we celebrate your bat mitzvah today and you continue to grow and mature is that Judaism can be a source of inspiration for you to keep doing the right thing, and that in whatever generation you find yourself, you're able to combine the best of Noah and Abraham to aspire to save the whole world by ensuring that others are cared for. I'd like to finish by offering you and your family with you the words of the priestly blessing. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichunecha, Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May Adonai bless you and guard you. May Adonai show you favor and be gracious to you. May Adonai show you kindness and grant you peace. Amen. We'll continue back in our Sidurim on